conversations with people from the Android community. I'm Chiu-Ki Chen, and today we're chatting with
Dan Liu.
Hi, Dan.
Hi, how's it going?
Great. Where are you based and what do you do?
I'm based out of Minneapolis in Minnesota, and I'm an Android developer for Trello.
Great. And how did you become an Android developer?
I joined my friend's small startup called Mobiata back in the day, and they started with an iOS app, and they needed Android developers, so that's where I got my start.
So you had no Android experience before that?
Nope. In fact, the first thing I did on the job was buy an Android phone.
That's a good first step.
That was my first
How
step.
about Java? Do you know any Java?
Yeah, I'd been doing Java server development before then.
That's at least something, like jumping right in. I've heard other people who jumped in from like Mathematica, which is very, very different from doing Java. So at least that was a pretty good transition.
Sure.
Cool. I have watched many of your talks and like your blog posts and everything, so I am kind of at a loss of what to talk about. But one thing that really struck me was I read a blog post about styling your views without going crazy. And I think that's a very valuable thing to do, not going crazy. So perhaps we can chat about themes and styles.
Yeah, sure. So where do you want to get started on that?
So I don't know other people, but for me, when I first started using themes and styles, I kind of just copy and paste it from whatever the manifest that says, oh, it's like app theme, and then I just paste it there. And I didn't really do anything with the theme part of the style.xml file, and I just went ahead and did the style part, which in my mind is essentially when you wanted to do, instead of repeating on every single one of your text view to say text size equals 16 SP, you can extract that into a style and apply that. So for me, like style is in a way easier to understand because for me it's just a shorthand for repeated attributes.
Yeah.
So like, what are themes like that?
Sure. Well, so let's start with styles. Styles are just the views themselves have attributes on it that you write inline, and if you want them not to be inline but to be defined somewhere else, then you create a style. And
then you can reuse it.
And then you can reuse it, and those attributes can be anything that would normally be applied just inline in the code.
Right, so like I mentioned, like text size and text color, and of course those are text views, so we can also do it for other things. Like maybe
and you can style any view you want. One of the main drawbacks of styling views is that you can only have one style per view.
I know, when I was initially looking at styles, I thought it's like CSS, where you can just apply it to the linear layout and all its children will have the same inherited property, but it doesn't work like that in Android. Yeah,
but you can get the semblance of two different styles on some views, because a lot of views, especially like text views and buttons and anything involving text, has another attribute called text appearance. And so text appearance is basically styles for all the things that just apply to the text.
Why are there two styles? I don't really understand that for the longest time.
I don't know what the origin of it is. Right. I would assume it's because of this problem that they don't have a CSS-like styling system, so you can't just apply multiple styles. So this gives you somewhat of that control because you can have view styles like setting the background or the size separate from setting things like the text size, the text font, whether it's bold or whether it's italicized.
So is that how you use text appearance? Because for me, I also kind of randomly choose one over the other when I need to change the style of a button, text, and things like that.
In general, if the only attributes that you're defining are the text-based attributes, it's best to use a text appearance because it leaves you open to adding a style later. Right. And the latest versions of AppCompat have a lot of built-in text appearances as well that you can use that are really good. Basically for all the different types of like headers and body and subtitles.
I didn't know.
And so it's really good to like look through those, and if you use all those styles, then you can actually get a real good-looking app just off the bat, and you can inherit from them.
And then you can add one or two of your own.
Yeah, exactly.
Nice. Cool. So, but we're still in style land.
We're still in style land. So you want to move over to theme land.
Yeah.
So themes. The thing that makes things confusing about styles versus themes is that they both use the same system. So styles and themes you tend to see defined in the same file or in two files, but they're using the same format. But they're actually two completely different things. They both define attributes, but they're defining attributes on a different scale. So with styles, you're defining attributes on a view-per-view basis, so very locally, whereas themes, you're defining attributes on a global basis. So instead of saying, I want this view to have a red background, you might be defining something saying like, I want all buttons to have a red background.
Okay.
Or or you're applying some theme attributes or things that you can't even do with a style, where you're theming like the entire behavior of the activity or the entire behavior of the fragment.
What is some example of that? Because I've never used it like that.
Oh, now I'm trying to rack my brain for this. I'm just thinking mostly about the meta theme things. Like there's a button style that you can have by default, and then you can automatically change the style of all buttons that you have.
So yeah, one thing I have done with that is basically I wanted my linear layout to have separated in between, and then like I kind of copied whatever the system was doing with the button bar. So that was kind of interesting because that opened up, to me at least, like the concept of having attributes within a style that get applied to individual views, if you know what I'm getting at. And that was like, wow, this is so powerful. And I basically only learned about it because I went to like study how the system was doing it. Because how did it make it so that all the button bars have this like separated in between? I don't know if you use that as well.
Oh yeah, all the time. Like the problem with styles and themes is that you will often be working on your application and your view won't be doing what you think it should be doing, and what's really hard is figuring out where that came from exactly. And that still occasionally drives me nuts, trying to figure out, like, did it come from some weird style inheritance or did it come from somewhere in the theme? And so it's another case where it just helps to look at the open source code and figure out what's going on. And then again, like, I'm a big fan of AppCompat, and AppCompat has all of these different themes and styles defined in order to make everything look somewhat material. To varying degrees based on how far backwards compatible you get. And so I find it very valuable to look through that, although it's a little bit hellish because of the crazy backflips that they have to do in order to make that work.
The compat part of AppCompat.
Yeah, there's a design doc, and I think it's 4 or 5 layers deep of themes in order to have them switch on things like the app version and theme versus or base it on material, base it on hollow, or stuff like that.
Yeah, I have not ventured into the source code of AppCompat yet, but one thing that I kind of want to go back to is that you were saying how it's so hard to figure out where does this particular look come from, right, from the style, from the theme. That's one thing that I get really jealous of web developers, because like when you do CSS, you can go to the Chrome DevTools, and then you can right-click on any element pretty much, and it will tell you, like, this comes from this particular style, and then you can even inline change it. I was so jealous. The one thing I discovered really recently, maybe it has been there forever, is that I was doing the hierarchy viewer, and I could change things on the fly. And it would change on my head. I was like, what is this sorcery? And why nobody else told me about? So I don't know if you know any something like that is like good for debugging.
I don't, unfortunately. I really wish I did. I do have one thing that I've done, which is the theme. Oh, so here's a good example of something that the theme can apply globally is colors. Okay. So especially in material, they've introduced the idea of like a color primary and a color secondary. And so you can just say, I want the primary color of my app to be a darkish blue. Right. And then that applies it to any, not just individual attributes, but just wherever a primary color be desired.
So maybe a checkbox background.
Yeah, so one of the things that I've done, and there's a gist of it somewhere online, I found every single theme color I could find, and I just set everything to some really ugly color. They're really ugly, but they're all different. And so you can launch your app with this debug color theme, and then it will
tell you what
you can use a digital color picker to be like, oh, what's the hex value of this particular square here?
I will find that just and put it on the show notes, because that's something that I struggle with as well. So why do you look like that? And sometimes the matter gets more complicated because of AppCompat. Sometimes I didn't specify the style, but with that and interacting with the one that I specified, then it just kind of go crazy.
Yeah, and I've heard rumors that Google might be working on some tool. I don't want to spread.
Actually, it was at I/O that they were talking about like a theme.
The possibility, the possibility of being able to just click on a view and be able to say where did these things come from specifically. That would be really nice if they worked on that. I hope they actually.
Yeah, no, because that would be really useful, because especially nowadays when a lot of the material comes from the color theming and whatnot, and you do really want to make sure that everything is what you were expecting, and then this one little thing that was different and you have no idea where.
Yeah, so the title of the post that you were referring to at the beginning was how to do style without going crazy. So I want to just mention a few things that I do in order to avoid these things driving me nuts. So the first thing is that styles, the local view things, it's applying an attribute to a bunch of views, and whichever views you apply that style to. And the really early inclination is to say, I've got 3 or 4 different views, and they all have the same attributes, so therefore I'm just going to make a single style and apply it to all 4 of them.
But semantically, they're not related.
But semantically, they're completely different.
Right.
And the fact that they were using the same attributes they don't move in the same direction.
Right, I mean, like, they're all saying, like, gravity center.
Yeah, exactly.
Gravity center doesn't mean that they will be like that forever.
Yeah, and so what you have is then one of them you say, oh, this button I don't actually want it to have these attributes of the other one, so you start overriding it. And then suddenly each one of them has overrides of the style, and now your base style, you're kind of got this, you're locked in place because you've got the base style and you don't want to change it for fear of breaking something, but you're barely even using it because all of these other styles are being
is not something that you can unit test and make sure there's no regression. Right? You kind of have to visually check.
Yeah. So the one thing I would highly recommend is that you, if you're using styles, they should be on something that's semantically the same.
Right.
So like if you have, say, a calculator, all of the buttons could be using the same style.
Right.
Because you know that when one of the button changes look, you want all the buttons to change look.
I think that's a good rule of thumb, basically. Like the style is going to be a grouping of things that when the look change, they should all change together. Like semantic is a little bit vague, but like, that would be like a more precise rule of thumb. It's like, okay, if you change one, all of them will have to change. Then it's a good thing to have a style for.
Yeah, and then the second thing is that you can actually have a style inheritance. So you can have a button style, and then you can have a button style that child style of that tweaks the way the button looks, and a child style of that tweaks it even further. And there's actually 2 ways of doing parenting. And I like to call it implicit versus explicit. Okay. And the implicit version is using dots. So you might have like theme.hollow, like a widget.hollow.button or something like that. And
that sounds dangerous.
So that just means that widget.hollow.button its parent is widget.hollow, whose parent is widget. Yeah. And so that's implicit. And then you can be explicit too, where instead in the style you say, blah, 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 this is my style name, and then as a second attribute you say parent equals widget.hollow. And then it turns out that they don't both work at once. Only explicit parenting works. So if you have an explicit parent,
so it trumps
the implicit parenting. And so what drives me crazy is that you can have this, say you can have a widget.hollow.button.special. Yeah. And actually, though, the parent could be something completely different.
Right, because you also set parent equal.
Yes. And so internally when I'm using it, and I know that people want to set these up to look pretty with the dots, but I find it's a lot easier if you either have implicit, you either have implicit or you have explicit, but you try as hard as you can not to mix the two. And usually the only time that you cross that barrier is when you're parenting from something in the base Android app, Android.
But you can still do parent equal. Like, what's stopping you from doing that?
Yeah, but the problem is you might say like my.widget.button, and then you have my.widget.button.special, and then you say that parent is something completely different. And so now you're in your source code, and you're like, oh, I want to change all of my buttons. So I change my.widget.button, and now your special one doesn't pick it up because it had explicit parents.
Like, why?
So it's it looks pretty. You have the semblance of hierarchy, but it's not actually hierarchical.
That's worse than
And then another thing I'd warn against is like styles and themes. Like I said, they use the same exact format, but they have the same parenting system and everything, but they aren't the same thing. Like styles apply locally, themes apply globally. They have completely different attributes. So like, for example, for a local style, layout width, layout height, maybe that makes sense.
Sure.
But you can't apply it as a theme, layout width and layout height.
Everybody has matched parents or what?
Yeah, so...
Actually, in general, I don't do width and height in style.
Yeah, it's not something I recommend, but it's the first thing that came to mind.
Right. Just to check it. Making sure people don't like, oh, that's the thing Dan likes to do. It's like, no, he does not like to do that.
But yeah, don't mix styles and themes, because then you'll just have very weird outcomes.
You mean, by mixing, you mean inheriting from...
Well, inheriting one from the other, or just getting the attributes mixed up and sticking theme attributes in a style, or style attributes in a theme.
Yeah.
One good thing that's happened recently in terms of theming. So theming used to be really nutso because you could only apply one theme to the entire activity. And so there used to be this theme that was like, hollow dot light dark action bar. And that was because the only way to say that I want to have most things be light, but then the action bar be dark, was to apply it in the entire theme. And now what they allow you to do in 5.0 and above is define themes on the views themselves. And so now the theme can be on the view, and it'll apply to that view and all the child views of them. So it's a little bit nicer. And so now you can just say, oh, I want to have a light theme, and then the toolbar itself can have this theme.
Or I can have a table that have a different theme within the...
And if you're using AppCompat in particular, this doesn't have to limit to 5.0. You can go all the way back to, I think API 11 is the earliest you can go back and still get all of the awesome functionality of using themes, and it's saved me so much. It makes things so much easier to know.
I'm so glad I'm talking to you about this rather than the other topics, because that's something that I have been struggling with in terms of just like, so I will do something like, okay, I want all my text to be of this dark gray, right? But then I will pop up, say, a dialogue within it, and then the dialogue I want it to be of the brand color for whatever reason, and then I'll be like, fine, I'll define a style and meticulously put it into every single text view child of that layout because I cannot apply a theme. So with what you're talking about, then I can define a theme just from that linear layout down, basically.
I'm not 100% sure, but I think with dialogues also you can define a theme on just the dialogue itself.
When you inflate it.
When you inflate it. And you can use, I mean, all of the themes are applied through the context. So I think you can use I think it's called a context theme wrapper to basically switch out one theme for another. And that's actually under the hood how individual views theming works. There's some great posts from Chris Baines, who's one of the main contributors to AppCompat, where he wrote about themes versus styles and how to use them properly. So.
Yeah, I've definitely used the context theme wrapper for whatever that. Oh yeah, now I remember. It's because I have a activity with a navigation drawer, and then I have multiple fragments in it. One of them is light theme, the rest is dark theme, because that's what the designers want. And I'm like,
but if you have a context theme wrapper, you can say, okay, just this fragment I'm going to use.
When I'm inflating the fragment, I was switching the theme on that one fragment, and then the rest was having just the theme for the whole activity. Like that. At that point, I was doing it by activity, not by the whole app, at least. But like when I had to change that for one fragment, it was like, I still want to stick with the themes because I like the fact that I don't have to remember every single time when I add a new text view, I have to put in the color to be white because the background is dark, and if I don't do it, that will be dark on dark, I can't see anything. So definitely, but yeah, I also really like the tip on doing it per layout. Great. I'm sure we can just sit here all day.
I'm sure, like this is we're kind of touching the surface of themes and styles. There's more to it than that. So.
And I'm not sure if it's okay to go public, but I think you're preparing a talk to be given somewhere this year on.
Well, maybe there was one of the possible. So Droidcon New York, they allowed you to apply for up to 3 talks, and one of them was maybe about styles.
So maybe we'll hear more about this. Maybe you'll want to talk.
Yeah, it tends to be that I give talks about whatever I'm interested in. And,
But
I don't know if I love styles and themes. It's just a kind of necessary evil.
Exactly. It's like if you don't master it, then you'll just spend a lot of time tweaking individual views. And just one day you'll be like, you know what? I'm just going to sit down and plow through this. I know it's painful, but it will help me.
And there are parts of the app you can't even theme. You can't even style without you knowing about themes. So, for example, if you're using the built-in alert dialog, that you don't have access directly to the title, the title view or the button views or anything like that. So, if you want to change the colors or the sizes of those, you have to use themes then.
Interesting. I have done it with Spanables.
Spanables?
Yeah.
Oh, that would totally work too, wouldn't it?
Yeah, so now I need to look into how to do it with themes, and you need to look into how to do it with Spanables. I mean, the world of Android is vast. Right? There's just so many different ways of doing things, which is why it's nice to talk to people and see what they do. Great. So yeah, I would love to chat more, but I think we should just stop it right there here so that
so we don't take an hour.
So it's still like a bite-sized conversation. But if people want to follow up and they want to find other great things that you do, where should they find you on the internet?
The easiest way is probably to find me on Twitter. My Twitter handle is DanLew42, DANLEW42.
Great. And if you want to follow me, my Twitter handle is Chiu-Ki, Chiuki. Well, Dan, thanks a lot for speaking with us.
Yes, thank you.
Then, well, shake hands. I usually just do this. Bye.
Bye.